idea of Section 3 in Chapter 2 was Spanish rule in the Americas had terrible consequences for the Native Americans. Now, why does it matter today? The destruction of Native American cultures created these social problems that continue today. Now, the California standard being covered is to discuss Mexican settlements and their locations, cultural traditions, attitudes towards slavery, land grant systems, and economies. And we're also going to review the 7.11 standard, where we look at the exchanges of plants, animals, technology, culture, and ideas among Europe, Africa, and Asia, and the Americas in the 15th and 16th centuries, and the major economic and social effects on each continent. Now, let's look at the words that we have here. Viceroyalty is a key word that we came across in one of our terms and names, and so we want to make sure that we get this done here. And the word viceroyalty has to do with provinces, and these provinces that were set up in the colonies by the Spaniards were split up into two provinces, one province being called New Spain and the other being called Peru. The second word is encomienda. This word has to do with the grant of Native American laborers. So it's also important to pull the definition either from your own understanding or from the glossary, and any other research that you find is very helpful. So I'm going to write next to encomienda that it was a grant of Native American labor. So a grant of Native American labor. Now, I want you to start connecting the dots between these words here, because they will connect to the graphic organizer in the cluster diagram that we'll be using second. So just take note of that. Now, the word hacienda. This is another great word that also should start making it more clear how the Spaniards were able to colonize and organize the Native Americans into their system. And so here we have the haciendas, which were large estates where the Native Americans would grow the food, and also this food would provide the food supply for the colony. Now, they would grow cash crops such as coffee and cotton, and it's the encomienda and hacienda systems that put much of the power and land in the hands of only a few people. Now, missions, and this really describes the role of the church. So let's pull down missions down here. And the word missions is a settlement where churches are included with the purpose of converting the Native Americans to Christianity. So I'm going to go ahead and write Native Americans and then draw this arrow, to show this conversion to Christianity. Now, in my notes, these are the decisions that I'm making so that I can go back and review and prepare for the assessment. Now, I'm going to write the next few words in blue just to show the difference. And we have the word pope. And pope was somebody who reacted. And Pope led the Pueblo Indians in a rebellion against the Spanish. And at a settlement in Santa Fe, in New Mexico, he forced the colonists to flee and ordered the churches and other Spanish buildings to be destroyed. And under this rebellion, they were able to revive native customs. However, in 1692, the Spanish would again regain control of Santa Fe. So, the word plantation is the large farms that would raise the cash crops. So next to plantation, I'm going to go ahead and write cash crops. And like we read in the Zen Young People's History of the United States, Bartolome de las Casas spoke out against the cruelty against the natives. Spoke out against cruelty. And now I'm crossing over, so I'm going to write that out, but at the same time, take it out. And the last word is Columbian exchange. And this word is powerful. And in your book, they have a graphic that kind of shows this. So I'm going to now put this in green. And the Columbian exchange is this exchange, or this trade, I should say. And it is in this Columbian exchange that we see diseases travel. We see different livestock, grains, from Europe, Africa, and Asia to the Americas, to Europe, Africa, and Asia. So it is this movement of living things between the hemispheres that embodies the Columbian exchange. So let's just say this exchange between hemispheres. And now I'm 5 minutes into my lesson, and yes, there were, I don't know how many words, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 words that we had to cover here. And so all important, critical to our understanding of the Spanish and Native American relationships, and some of the challenges and the cruelties and the abusive treatment that was both racist and fair, and just so many words. And we'll look at different infinitives and adjectives to really break down both books and any other resource that we come across. In any case, I want to bring our attention to part 2 so that we can collect our points for this assignment. And it's using graphics. And we want to use this cluster diagram, like the one below, to show how Spain organized its colonies. Now, there's 3 words that we saw on our terms and names that really reflect our reading and how Spain was able to organize the colonies. And I know the first word that comes to mind, and hopefully comes to yours, is this idea of the mission. And the mission really allowed the Spaniards to put power and land in the hands of a few Spanish people. So the church and the missions played a very key role to organizing that. So next to a church, and also I'll put it in a different color to show that it's a different note. Another way to make sure that this cluster diagram is complete is to note that land and labor were organized into haciendas and into the encomienda system. So hacienda and encomiendas really organized this labor system. And I'll put it in this black. We have the idea of the viceroyalties, which was one of our first words, and I know it can be tough to pronounce if you've never seen it, but again, try it, viceroyalties. And the viceroyalties is again this idea of provinces, and they split them into 2, New Spain and Peru. And by creating these 2 provinces, it makes it a lot easier to manage. Now, how did these actions help the Spanish control the Americas? Now, this is that historical interpretation. So really give this some thought, and we'll have a discussion on this to really take it to the next level. Now, to bring it to a close, because I really want to finish this in 10 minutes, is what were the 4 levels of Spanish colonial society? So we read that on the first page, I believe it's on page 71, where on the top of this power pyramid is the how would you say? I have it here. I almost want to say, oh, here we go. The Spanish born, and they were the top layer. And so let's I'm going over my notes. So in this top layer, we have those that are Spanish born, and then in the next layer, we have the Creoles, or the Creoles, who were Spanish but were born in the Americas. And the third layer, or a step down in the social order, were the mestizos. Let me make that line better. The mestizos. And last but not least, after the mestizos, were the people with the fewest rights and least amount of power, which were the slaves and or the Native Americans. Okay, now both being victims of racism and both being faced with very cruel punishment. Now, what was the main crop grown on colonial plantations? And the answer to that is sugar. You know, they grew sugar. And that was important because the environment really lent itself to farming sugar in mass amounts. And C, how were Native Americans abused in the colonies? So the Native Americans were abused both physically, mentally, forced into hard labor, and sometimes, I mean, not sometimes, I would say killed and tortured in ways that are against human nature. So against human nature, I can write, before that I'm going to say forced into labor, and then add my ellipses, and we'll have more discussion about that. Again, thank you, and I hope you continue to do your homework. My name is Mr. Legaspi, and please keep watching this playlist for new assignments and review.